In this video, we'll be looking at one woman who, although was largely overshadowed by her husband, they say that behind every great man is an even greater woman. And when you look through the history of some of the greatest and most notable men who ever lived, you kind of see that this saying holds water. In this video, we'll be looking at one woman who, although was largely overshadowed by her husband, also did a lot of work for women's rights in Ethiopia and beyond. This is the story of Empress Menen Asfaw, a woman of immense value. When you think about Ethiopian history, there is one name that absolutely can't be left out. That's Haile Selassie I, the Emperor of Ethiopia from 1930 to 1974. He's broadly considered a defining figure in modern Ethiopian history. Born as Tafari Makonnen, he did a lot of work to modernize Ethiopia by following his uncle's legacy, King Menelik II, through several social and political reforms. He introduced the 1931 Constitution, and he also led the abolition of slavery in the country. He set the foundation of the university in Ethiopia and emphasized the importance of education for the development of his nation. Even better, his diplomatic abilities and his internationalist views were what led Ethiopia to become a charter member of the United Nations. As a representative of the only country in Africa that was never colonized, Haile Selassie's liberation of the African continent from foreign powers and the economic and political integration of the continent. As a respected African king, he also became a prominent figure for the African descent people outside the continent, including the Rastafari movement, which is a black liberation and religious movement that suddenly emerged in the Caribbean at the throne. Ras, which means head in Amharic, is a title in the Ethiopian tradition, and Tafari means creator. Rastafari means head to be feared or respected. It was by this name Haile Selassie I was recognized before receiving his baptismal name during the coronation. Essentially, saying Haile Selassie was a great man would be to significantly underestimate his value to his country and his people. However, while Selassie was essentially the one whom everyone knew, his wife, Empress Menen Asfaw, was just as impressive. As an empress, she was loved by the people of Ethiopia. She was also an advocate and pioneer for women's education in his country, and she was known for displaying significant concern for social issues. Menen was born in Ambasso, which is located in the Wallo province of the Ethiopian Empire, in March 1889. She was the daughter of Asfaw, the Jantarar of Ambasso, who was also a prominent ruler in his own right. Her mother was also the daughter of King Mikael of Wallo, whose family claimed to be descendants of Prophet Muhammad, while her uncle was Lige Iyasu, the Muslim emperor of Ethiopia from 1913 to 1916. Not much is known about her early life. According to reports, Menen had 3 husbands at a pretty early age. This was the prevailing custom, so no one really batted an eyelid when Menen was married off, but as we will see, this was an important women's issue that Menen endeavored to change years later when she became an empress. Menen was first given to a prominent Wallo nobleman, with whom Menen had 2 children, a daughter and a son. However, the marriage didn't last. Menen got a divorce, and her family then arranged for her to be married to another very prominent nobleman of Wallo. In her second marriage, Menen bore 2 children, once again, a daughter and a son. On this occasion, her marriage would end abruptly when her husband sadly passed away. Once more, Menen's family arranged a match for her. Her grandfather, Negus Mikael, arranged for her to be wedded to a prominent Shuian nobleman, who was considerably older than Menen. This marriage happened around 1910, but it didn't last long at all. In fact, there's still been some debate as to whether the two were actually married and got a divorce, or if it was no more than just a mere engagement. Either way, the union between the two did not last very long. And soon after, Menen was a single woman once more. According to historical records, there's no defined place where Menen met Tafari. However, most sources claim that the two first met at the home of Menen's uncle, Lige Iyasu. The two reportedly hit it off, and soon after Menen's divorce from her third husband, she was arranged to marry Tafari. At this point, he was still known as the Josmach Tafari Makonnen. On August 3, 1911, Tafari and Menen were officially wedded. At the time, Menen was 22 years old, while Tafari was just 19 years of age. Tafari already had a previous wife and child, but it was Menen whom he chose to be his official empress. And when Tafari was finally crowned in 1930, Menen was the one who was beside him. On the 2nd of November of 1930, the coronation took place in Addis Ababa, with international guests from Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. Empress Menen was crowned the same day as Emperor Haile Selassie, contrary to what other emperors did in the past, when the empress was crowned days or even weeks after the emperor. Although their marriage was mostly instituted as a political match designed to create peace between the Ethiopian nobles, Menen and Tafari were said to have gotten married with mutual consent, and by all accounts, theirs was a peaceful union indeed. Haile Selassie I later described his wife as a woman without any malice whatsoever, and the people of Ethiopia also loved Menen very much. You see, there were several reasons why Menen was so beloved by her people. However, easily the most prominent was the fact that she wasn't just the usual empress who would stay by her husband's side and nod politely when he ruled. Menen took an active role in government, particularly championing women's rights and being an advocate for many of their issues. As empress, she noticed that education would be beneficial in helping to change traditional marriage practices. She made the education of girls a priority, and she founded the Empress Menen School for Girls in Addis Ababa, the first all-girls school which took in girls from all over the empire and gave them quality modern education. She wisely considered that education could positively impact the decision-making capabilities of the girls and also contribute to their poverty. Empress Menen also gave very generously, sponsoring programs for the poor, ill, and disabled people across the empire. As a devout member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, she worked to build and renovate several churches, both in Ethiopia and in Palestine. Menen even gave her personal funds to build the new Cathedral of St. Mary of Zion at Axum, although sadly, she didn't live to see it completed. She was also the patroness of the Ethiopian Red Cross, as well as the Ethiopian Women's Charitable Organization. She was also the patroness of the Jerusalem Society, which arranged pilgrimages to Jerusalem for believers. When the Italians occupied Ethiopia between 1936 and 1941, the emperor with the empress were exiled from the country. While her husband worked to reclaim control over his country, Menen pledged to the Virgin Mary at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, promising to give her crown to the church if Ethiopia were liberated from the oppressors. She made multiple pilgrimages to Palestine, praying for the liberation of her homeland. And on May 5, 1941, on Ethiopia's Victory Day, when Haile Selassie returned to Ethiopia as emperor, a replica of Menen's crown was made for her and future empresses. The real one was sent to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, showing that Menen was indeed true to her word. Until her death, Menen would never wear a full crown again, although she did occasionally wear a tiara at public events. In general, Menen did more than perform admirably in her role as the emperor's consort. She displayed significant concern for social issues, supporting development schemes to the best of her ability. At the same time, she visited schools, churches, and public events, mingling with the common people and showing the type of altruism that made her, and by extension, her husband, incredibly beloved by the people. While she took up no public stand on political issues, Menen was said to have been one of her husband's most trusted advisors behind the scenes. Records showed that she quietly gave her advice on a broad range of issues, lending a listening ear and providing her counsel when needed. Of course, this isn't to say that things were all rosy. In December 1960, the Council of the Revolution, 4 conspirators led by brothers Germain Niwe and Brigadier General Mengistu Niwe sought to overthrow the government of Emperor Haile Selassie while he was away on a state visit to Brazil. The coup leaders declared the emperor's rule illegitimate, instead seeking to institute a new government led by his son, Crown Prince Asfal Wasson. As they believed, the Crown Prince was a more modern ruler who understood the societal and economic issues that Ethiopia faced, unlike his father, who they believed to have been out of touch. The council managed to gain control of most of Addis Ababa, and they took several ministers and other notable people hostage. Empress Menen was placed under house arrest during this period, being held at her villa outside the palace grounds in northern Addis Ababa. Nevertheless, the coup was crushed, and the emperor regained power with his empress still by his side. Empress Menen eventually died in 1962 at the age of 72. She was buried in the crypt of the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Addis Ababa, right among the tombs of her children. In his eulogy, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Aklilu Habte Wold paid tribute to Menen's piety, as well as her role as an advisor and helpmate to the emperor. On the third day of her memorial, the emperor himself paid tribute to his wife, saying that in 5 decades of marriage, they never needed a third party to mediate anything between them. He described their marriage as one of peace and mutual support and claimed that he'd miss his dear wife. As Empress of Ethiopia, Menen has been highly venerated by members of the Rastafari movement. They describe her as Queen Omega, a name which compliments her as the partner to Emperor Haile Selassie, or as the Rastas call him, King Alpha. As we have seen, Empress Menen of Ethiopia was not behind her husband. It's not only that she was crowned the same day as the emperor, but she was also a pioneer in women's education and human rights in the 20th century. She was very religious, not only in words, but also in works. In a few words, she was an example of a powerful woman, of